This video is part of a series on experiences of the Enneagram from the 27 subtypes. I'm aiming to interview people of each subtype, so you get to hear and experience what those different voices and life experiences sound like. I hope you enjoy. Hi, Victoria. Thank you for taking the time to share with us today. Could you share with us the country that you live in, your Enneagram type, subtype, and instinctual sequence?
Sure. Hello, Matt. Thank you for having me on to speak about the sexual four, which is my subtype. I'm Victoria, and I live in Colorado, the United States. And I am a sexual four, and my instinctual sequence, if I look at the three subtypes of the four and I read the descriptions of each of them, then it would be sexual, self-pres, social, the social being repressed. I have really pushed against that. I have wanted to be sexual, social, self-preservation repressed. And I think, and it is out of envy that I've wanted that. But I continue to land if I look at the instinctual sequence being created largely by looking at the three descriptions and which one I resonate with most and least, then it would be sexual, self-pres, social repressed.
Thank you for sharing that, Victoria. Just out of interest, why were you kind of resisting the social as being repressed? What was that you didn't feel comfortable with at first, maybe?
I studied with Beatrice and Aranio from the Chestnut Pies Enneagram Academy. I went through their professional certification program, and I've listened to, I don't know, all of their podcast episodes and the large amount of content that they have on their website membership platform. And they have a couple of webinars or podcasts out there talking about the instinctual sequences and what like descriptors for the instinctual sequences, right? So when I compared the sexual with social repressed to sexual with self-preservation repressed, I didn't want to be the descriptors that were under the sexual with social repressed because they felt they were so bad to me. I knew, said, oh my gosh, I don't know. I am like the self-pres repressed. I like that is me. It just seemed more likable. And
Okay.
so,
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Victoria. Yeah, I know the ones you mean. And that's really interesting because they give a general list of the sequences, don't they? But obviously, as you'll appreciate, that will change type by type.
right.
Yeah.
And that I was right. It does change type by type, but I took it at face value
Yeah.
in the moment and then had a big push against it. And so that's been a bunch of my work is to, relax back the immediate seeing of it and then taking it personally to really like turn inward. Okay, what actually is going on?
Okay.
Yeah. Is this really true?
Yeah, and that's as you'll appreciate, that's the whole point of this, isn't it? Of like looking inward and getting in touch with our motivations and our wounds and all sorts. And the descriptors can be like a signpost to it, even if it's a generalized list. Because when I first saw that generalized list myself, I didn't really overly relate at first to the sequence of SP, SO, SX in the sequence, but after some time of looking and evaluating myself and learning more about it, I realized, yeah, that is me.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Victoria, when it comes to the Enneagram, when did you first hear about it?
First heard about it in late 2017. uh, got in a relationship with my partner, who I've since been in a relationship with, and he had been studying, studying the Enneagram for 20 years by that point.
Wow.
And so he typed me as a sexual one.
Interesting.
And mm-hmm. And he, at that time, just a quick story, he was identifying as a sexual 9.
Okay.
And he was taking that from the Blue Book from Riso and Hudson, like back from the late 90s, when the instincts combined with the types was more theoretical, was more, well, if we look at this instinct and how it combines with the type, then it should look like this. And
Right.
then Beatrice Chestnut came out with the Countertypes, her 27 subtypes book, and the Countertype, it just cracked everything open. And he's no longer a sexual 9, but a self-preservation 4. So anyway, that's how
Mm.
I learned about it, was from him, my partner.
Yeah. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that, Victoria. And I find it really interesting how your partner at the time identified you as the sexual one, because that, as you'll know, is a lookalike type for sexual 4. So
it is.
I find those kind of things exciting in the sense that it seems to time and time again I've had experiences where it backs up the theory and the teaching that we've received through CP Enneagram Academy, how important and close the lookalike types are. How we can, people that look at us and on the outside and go, yep, sexual 1, but really it's a lookalike type for sexual 4. I find it so interesting.
Absolutely. And I can look like someone of, like say a 6 or an 8 or any other, except for the sexual 9 generally, and look more like them being sexual dominant than
Mm.
my partner, who's also a 4 and same as me, same type as me. Does that make sense? Like I can look more like someone who's sexual dominant, who's another type, have more seeming similarities than my partner, who's also a 4, who's the same type as me, but we're
Yeah.
different. We're different dominant in instincts.
Sure.
So yeah, that I was looking like, I mean, and then the sexual 1 and sexual 4 have that connect, and they're both critical of the self, or they've got that kind of inner critic or the inner, like, oh, badness or wrongness. I mean, they're different, but they do share that in common. So yeah, they are lookalikes. And then
Yeah.
right, what the sexual instinct does for each of the types. So not that I'm going to go into that, but it made sense at the time that he was typing as a sexual 1.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point that you make as well about the type fours, because through B and Aranier, we've been taught, haven't we, that type 4 and type 6s are the two types out of the 9 where the subtypes are most important because they're so different from each other, aren't they? The subtypes, so different. So you can have a type 4, but the social, sexual, and the self-pres look so different from each other.
Yes. And that is, yes. I, mhm. I'm like, what can I say about that? Um, yeah, my partner and he's self-pres dominant, sexual repressed.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
so, and I'm not, when it comes to being confrontational or to bring forward what's actually here and what's actually, what my internal experience is, and speaking that, I have more ease in doing that. I can't help it, actually, which has been the
Mm.
practice of which has been, growth work of my subtype as a sexual 4, to not be so quick to express the pain or express the truth that is inside me. It's more hold it in and be with it, and um yeah, and feel through it. Yeah,
That sounds good.
sort out. I don't have the words. The words aren't landing for me, but hopefully you and everyone else is getting the gist of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Thank you, Victoria. So over the since at the end of 2017, when you found out about it, what's kind of been your general experience of the Enneagram since then?
Mm. Um, in dramatic four fashion, it's been a lifesaver for
Oh,
me in almost a
yeah,
literal way. Not that I was on the precipice of like, taking it all, like taking my, like nothing like that, but really life was, um, yeah, it's life was hard for me. And so with it was everything. Life is everything. I'll word it like that.
yeah,
So my experience since learning it and diving right into it, um, it wasn't actually until I do want to share how I landed, because this it actually it works better if I share how I landed on being a sexual four,
sure.
because I took, I don't know, it was a few years later that I took the professional training with Bia Naranio. I graduated last May or June with them. So I was like the year before that, I was, in program with them. And then before that, from 17 to whenever, you do the math, I was a sexual one. Then I moved to self-preservation four. Then I jumped over for a little bit. I thought, I'm a social eight. And I didn't want to be a sexual eight, because I said, oh no, I can't, but I'm a social eight because of how I'm protecting you, Bryce. So I went through this whole thing and only lasted a couple of weeks. And then I went back to being a sexual one. So when I went into the program with Bia Naranio and their first retreat, my first retreat that I did with them, I went in as a sexual one. They work on each person in the program. So when they worked on me, or they, did a session with me, it was on the last day.
Mm,
And it was toward the end of my session with them, where I don't remember the necessarily what we were talking about, but I said at one point, I said, I hate my sister. And it had been like a leading up to that point, like just like, and Aranio just interjected right at that point and said, Vic, we really, or maybe he said, I really think that you should consider that you are a sexual four.
mm,
And it was at that moment that I I trust being around you, and I feel safe. I felt safe with them to be in this moment of open acceptance to what actually is, to go in and see it, or like it was just, yeah. And I just, it just landed. It just was, yep, yep. That's what yeah. So from that point on, and actually at that moment, it was such a relief. And I could own that I'm a sexual four from that moment on, and not be ashamed of it, not be embarrassed, not own it. And it's like it was this opening into, okay, this is the personality that I'm doing, or um and it's not it's not me, or there's something, so like through this limited personality, wow, there's something so so good inside of that. So I my relationship with the sexual four, it changed in that moment to where I I met it, I accepted it, and I said, all right, now the good work. Now the good work begins. And so there was relief, there was sobriety, there was okay, now what's the path?
Mm.
And yeah, an excitement too. While, it's for any type and for any subtype, the growth path has its challenges. It can be intense, and you want to stay all like squirmy so you can stay in your limited self. I mean, I say you, but I think that to be true.
I believe it is. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, mhm.
Thank you for sharing that, Victoria. So up until that point at the retreat or the workshop with being around you, had you not considered the sexual four at that point? You mentioned social eight. You're like, no, I don't want to be the sexual eight, which is again a lookalike type for sexual four. Sexual one, again, lookalike type for sexual four. And you thought maybe the self-pres four, which in your sequence is second, which may be quite close. Is the self-preservation quite close to your sexual? Or is
It
it?
is.
Yeah.
It is well, it is quite close. And this is a great question. Thank you for bringing that, because I would I would read the book and I'd flip over the sexual four description. I'm like, oh hell no, can't. Like I would avoid the pages. I would avoid anything that had to do with the sexual four. So I said, oh, that's just awful.
Oh no, yeah.
Awful.
Which was
So
telling
there
of
was,
itself, wasn't it?
yeah, it always was. It always was. Like,
On
and I,
reflection. So
mhm.
you would skip over the sexual form like, oh no, like no, get away from me. And then you hadn't really sort of seriously considered it for yourself until that retreat, until that time with being around you. And then you're like, and then you find you were able to accept it without the shame. There was an
Yeah,
acceptance of it.
I couldn't let it in.
Mm,
Couldn't let it in.
interesting.
Yeah, there was such a repulsion to it. It was
Yeah,
very good.
yeah. Now, these might not be the right words or the right way of saying this, but I wonder if, like, the sexual four was in your shadow because you didn't see it, and in some ways didn't want to see it. And whilst that was the case, you were not able to, as you said, go in a different direction because you were still in the pattern of the sexual four. Um, and not even wanting to acknowledge it. So, when you were able to accept it without the shame piece, so then you're able to identify, okay, the sexual four patterns and what have you, and the growth path specifically for the sexual four. You're able to move forward, and create different patterns that are different from the sexual four. But I'm not sure what your experience has been of that, but it's not easy, is it?
No, and I think as you speak, what's rolling through me is um, my upbringing and my family dynamic, and this um, that had influence on how I showed up on my expression. And so my self-preservation instinct went like really close to my sexual four instinct
Okay.
because of my just the yeah, like there wasn't any room for more aggressive honest communication, or I don't know what this is all. It's not really fleshed out right now. It's just kind of floating around in me right now. So I don't know
Okay,
how well I've articulated. I don't want to spend too much time.
sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I have heard it taught from being around you that one of the assessment factors, as you'll know, if if in our family culture, if a subtype wasn't allowed for whatever reason to be their subtype, um, even though when we're older we want to learn how to, see the patterns of the subtype so we can, make conscious choices rather than being on an autopilot subtype mode. There is that the reverse side of that is if we weren't allowed to be our subtype for whatever reasons, it's almost it can be healing later on in life when we go, okay, so now I can enjoy or spend some time being my subtype, as a way, and that can be growth, like accepting what our subtype is and having a freedom in going, oh yeah, so these are my patterns. These are my patterns, and there's no shame in it. They're here to help me until they become unhelpful.
Thank you for that, Matt. Yes, that is that is absolutely true. And when I saw, oh, I'm a sexual four, and I stepped into that, and I saw more clearly my actual patterns, and then letting them move through me, whether they were like letting them move through me more freely so that I could actually live that subtype, and then do the necessary work of
Yeah,
that subtype on a growth path.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And
And
it's
it,
very mm-hmm.
yeah, and it sounds like that. Part of the necessary work for you was to have to own the sexual four piece. And I keep saying without the shame because that just when you said that it had a weight to it that you were able to you went from going no not the sexual four to yeah the sexual four, and there's no shame here with that. Yeah,
That's it. That's it. Yeah.
yeah. So since
Very
I guess
good.
since
That's
I guess
very
since
good.
uh
Thank you.
thanks Victoria. Thank you. So since the retreat, how have you found being a sexual four like helpful? How have you found identifying the sexual four? What's your growth been like since landing with that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oof. Um, I'd say a lot of it initially relaxing back and down this instinctual energy of the sexual instinct. So the force, the energetic force wanting to, just move out forward. So catching that, catching when that's happening, and not trying, not denying it or distracting, but being with it, and not saying no to it, but not expressing it, and having a very neutral relationship with it. One, I think in the beginning it was, no, it did. It was like this. It was both neutral and loving. Loving in that, hey, this is energy. It's just it's moving through. It's all, we got to stay in it and be with it, and trust that this is uh, healing something or alchemizing something, or something's letting go. So that was largely the first few steps on the path that I'm recollecting is, after seeing like I am a sexual four, and accepting that and kind of, letting that flow. And then it was, okay, relaxing back and down that energy. So that was, yeah, that was the initial, um, and seeing the man, like getting a deeper cut into what I've always known that I've been envious, and I've
Mm.
wanted to deny it because it's just awful. It was awful to
Okay.
me. Um, but that is what, like, I couldn't help myself at the end of the day in projecting my envy, blaming others for my own pain.
Mhm.
So I started to do the work of okay, what is envy? What is this chronic, constant comparing and that disappointment and all of the manifestations of envy, looking at them, seeing
Mm.
them in real
Yeah.
time, and how, wow, envy is, I mean, it's ever present. But really, if I'm really honest. And um, so working with the passion of envy and catching how it was manifesting in me. That's been a large part of the work. And, and Matt, like a big part is, oh man, getting in touch with my sadness, getting in touch with my sadness and expressing it to others. Real vulnerability that is not vulnerability that's unhealthy, attacking, hurt, painful. So I'm going to blame you out there. Not that vulnerability, because that's not the real vulnerability that I need to be in touch with. It's the deep pain that I feel, and about, yeah, my own, um, just my own, like that inferiority, the deficiency, the not good enoughness. And so being really vulnerable and, I mean, crying and it's just super raw, what a gift. Seeing others saying, thank you, wow, that's incredible. The strength and the vulnerability and the authenticity. And, um, but I'm not doing, but it's different from the social four that
Mm.
is not to do that on their growth path.
Yeah.
Um, but for me, yeah, that's been part of the growth path. And then, things get moved, things get cleared, cleaned, healed. So that's not then so much of the experience anymore. I
Mm.
all of this in service to converting the passion to the virtue.
Yeah.
So, virtue of equanimity and emotional balance, and that I can be in all of the feels, but not be pulled under and in the sea swells of them. There, I I'm in a intelligent relationship with them. I guess it would be, words get a little tricky sometimes for me. 'Cause I'm like, well, is it? But yeah, and when that, like, that's happening more and more, and I'm present, then I'm just more present in the moment, and the amount of creativity inside that is so cool. I'm how like the amount of creativity in relationship with others. And so I'm not leading from this envious place. It's comparing myself to others and something's missing inside me and that the other has. It's just not, yeah, it's just not happening. And it does come up. Like we had friends over yesterday for lunch, and she's she's an influential person, and she works with hundreds of people and like 2-year programs for her, or it's like real. And seeing the envy coming up in me, like, oh, she knows everything, and what's my value, and what do I have to offer with the work that Bryce and I do with people. We do deep inner work with people, like real deep, beautiful inner work, um, which I won't speak to, but just because of the sensitive nature of it. And and then seeing, like, catching myself comparing to her and wanting to, just very, very slight, seeing like me wanting to get competitive with her,
Mm.
but not, but I've just been in the river of this practice for some time now, like real, just everyday practice with it, that it's not, it just doesn't have, I was able to catch it and then see it for what it was. It opens up a new space inside me. And um, I say, okay, she's doing her thing. She's got her wisdom teachings and all of her, and I've got mine. Don't forget yours, Vic. You
Yeah.
you got something here, but not in this posturing way that I would do in the past to kind of prove myself or make myself feel better. It's just relaxed back down, the nurturing of my social instinct, that I do have a place here, and for the collective. Um, yeah, yeah. I was like that. I mean, I matter. That doesn't totally land for me right now. It's like, yeah, I matter. It's more that I have value, that and it's been getting out of my own way of taking things so personally. So
Mm.
when I don't take things personally and make it about myself, then that, again, that opens up something new to be in connection with.
Thank you so much for everything that you shared there, because you are doing amazing inner work, working on the passion of envy and how you said it was, how it was and is ever present, and that's so true. I can relate to that as a passion of fear. It's constantly, it's a daily thing. You mentioned about working on sadness and how that is one of the key things to work on for a sexual four. And I love how you are able to notice and be present to the passion in real time, in interactions with people, that the envy would want to compare, and then want to know what's missing and play all the games that comes with the subtypes. And I would imagine that your relationships have improved as a result of the growth work that you've done, even if the other person isn't necessarily aware of it. Just how it is, how the relationship sits within you, and how you feel after being with people. You're not kind of in this, like, in the passion isn't ruling you. You're surrendering it and being aware of it and working on it, and you seem really grounded in your body, and you just seem to be like really peaceful, really incredibly peaceful. And I would love to know the practices that you do, to be able to get to this, like, peaceful, grounded state as a four. because as you know, the fours, before they do growth work, can be up and down emotionally. But you seem very calm and very steady.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Yeah. The 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 Enneagram has been the primary tool for arriving at this point where I am. Um, but and other and so there's that, and then I also have a yoga practice, a yoga asana practice, and on the mat practice, and that really, um, yeah, it wasn't until I arrived here in Colorado, Boulder. I'm in Boulder, Colorado. That I met this hatha yoga teacher, Sophia Diaz, which just she wasn't a, I'll say, like a marketplace yoga teacher. She just like the real deal. Like she didn't teach out of the studio, and so she was all about coming face to face with what's really here, with what our personality is doing, all of our closures, etc. Like we don't go on the mat to get the hit of bliss. We go on the mat to really like step into what's here. And so my yoga practice, which now has the Enneagram all infused in it, and I teach yoga as well. So the yoga practice, and also of late, there is this app called iAwake, and it is sound technology that entrains the brain to different wavelengths. Like there's beta, alpha, delta, epsilon, lambda, gamma, hypergamma. And I've been doing meditations, and oh, that's just been powerful for me. Um, so that as well, doing that morning and night, being in a conscious relationship with my partner, and both of us on using the Enneagram as a primary tool. Um, and there's also been, I'll just give a nod to Personality Hacker. I don't know if you're familiar with Personality Hacker.
Love those guys. Yeah.
Yeah, the Myers-Briggs system. So I haven't done any programming with them, but just all their content. I've gotten profiled by them and have the owner's manual for my type and listen to their podcast. So the
What is your
Myers-Briggs
type?
system too. I am an ENTJ.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I went back twice to Personality Hacker, like, are you sure? And it's just landing. And so yeah, which
Yeah.
has been cool because to see, wow, I'm actually a thinker.
Mm.
And being in the heart triad and being a four and all about feelings. And that doesn't necessarily mean that then I have to be it doesn't necessarily mean that my wiring would be feeling in my decision making, primary.
Right. Okay. Okay. And to relate to what you're saying, I am in the head triad as a 6, but an INFP. So I'm a feeler in the Myers-Briggs system, but a head type in the Enneagram system. But it is interesting because the self-preservation 6 are kind of the more in the more emotional of the three of the three sixes. Or they were all emotional as human beings, but there's more of an emotional piece to the self-preservation 6. Yeah, I just find it really interesting how the differences can take shape with the Enneagram and Myers-Briggs. With
Yeah.
yourself as a heart type in Enneagram, but thinking in Myers-Briggs, and the opposite for me.
Yep. Yeah. It's so cool. Yeah. All of the different um, blendings. It's not as it's I I like how nuanced it all it all can get.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, me
uh,
too.
yeah.
I was going full steam ahead with Personality Hacker, and I was going full steam ahead with it. And then the Enneagram came along my path in late 2017, so a similar time to you. And no disrespect to Personality Hacker, because I love their work, love what they do. But when the Enneagram crossed my path, I dropped everything and I just became consumed with the Enneagram. And I've been kind of just focused on that since then, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. The Myers-Briggs is a support. The Enneagram is is the primary tool for me.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Victoria, so since like the growth work that you've been doing, you mentioned yoga and working with sadness and becoming aware of the passion of envy. Um, how have you found the Enneagram and your subtype the most helpful in your life? Like, how has it been really specifically helpful to you in your life?
Mm. I would say, oof, that I can't right now pinpoint.
Mm,
It very much it's been most helpful for everything.
yeah,
Um, all relationships. It's impacting every aspect of my life. Work, uh, just relationships with friends. The hardest work for me right now is in relationship with my sisters, my three older sisters, and and the Enneagram is so I'd say that that's it's most helpful for leading up to this largest work in my life. At least that looks like it's the largest work is in relationship with my sisters. So I don't
yeah,
know. I'm kind of answering the question, I think, a little differently,
yeah,
or
yeah.
I think I'm answered. Am I?
Yeah. So you're going into the sort of season that you're in at the moment with the growth work you're doing is primarily focused with your sisters and the relationship that you have with your sisters. So before all of the self-awareness that you've gained with the Enneagram and Myers-Briggs and the growth work you've done, would I be right in thinking you wouldn't be able to be in the place that you are now to you know to work on your relationship with your sisters had it not been for all of the growth work and the journey that you've been on to be able to get you to this point?
Correct. And if it
Yeah,
wasn't for the Enneagram, I I I'm one of those people seeing how I'm like, I don't want to give full credit to one thing, but
okay,
if it the Enneagram or I don't want to become this is it. It's more I don't want to become that spokesperson. And it's like that's just talking the talk, but they don't really know. Yeah, the Enneagram has just like I said, it's been a lifesaver. Um and if it wasn't for the Enneagram, I would have been, I would have been surviving still. And I don't know, maybe another system would have been here and I'd I'd be on, hey, I'd be in a I who knows. But man, gratitude to the Enneagram and gratitude to be in Uranio for the work that they do with it.
mm,
Um, yeah, the subtype work, yeah, just the growth path, how individual it is. Um, Yeah.
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 Thanks for sharing that, Victoria. So you said in the areas that it's been most helpful to you is what in all areas of your life, but you mentioned in the area of relationships. Um, just out of interest, would you happen to know what subtypes your sisters are? Does that has that kind
Mm.
of played a part in why it was a challenge, or is it far more complicated than that?
So my sisters aren't, I have done a typing interview with them when I was in the certification program. I was just on my own. I was typing a bunch of people, and I was surprised that they all agreed to be typed.
Oh,
And so I I have a lot of challenge with what types my sister are, and or subtypes my sisters are. I think one of them is a sexual six. I
yeah,
think one of them is a she's either a seven or a one to me. Um, and the other one, which is odd, it's like a seven or a one. She's probably a seven. And then the other a three. And I think a self-pres three. Self-preservation three. Um, self-preservation seven. Um, and a sexual six.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And have you found like being able to potentially put your sisters into their potential subtype is able you to see, so that explains that behavior, that explains that behavior, and that explains that behavior.
Yes. And with that said, I I continue to struggle with their subtype.
Mm,
Not the sexual six, and I just continue to see it more and more, and I can show up with her differently, and then support, just hold her in a different way. But my other two sisters, yeah, it's a little bit trickier. My one sister is on a path, and she's on a spiritual path, and she's going in. So, um, yeah, it's getting easier and easier with her. But my other sister, who has said, like, I live in my bubble, Vic. I don't go deep. I like my life how it is. That's been really challenging for me because
okay,
yeah. So
okay,
I don't think sisters are gonna see this podcast, this podcast interview. So then I'm like, well, oh well.
yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Victoria. And you mentioned earlier about identifying subtype, the sexual four, your subtype, and you mentioned you thought maybe sexual one for a while, social eight, self preservation four. Were there any other subtypes that you were considering before
Mm,
landing with sexual four?
mm-mm. No. No. Nope.
Okay,
I've got ways about me that are a little seven-ish. They're seven-ish, but I never considered that as my type.
okay. And would you know what Enneagram type subtypes your parents are?
Yeah, we're I uh my mom a two, and probably yeah, as far as subtype goes, um maybe a self-pres social sexual. My dad, a nine or a six.
Okay,
That's what I would, not a nine, a six, or a one. It's hard. He died when I was 13. And
yeah,
I just can't, yeah, I almost am not, I don't. I don't know. I guess I could go in more to see what type he was, but something that feels not, I don't know. I don't know. I just haven't, yeah, I haven't landed on his type.
Thank you for sharing that,
Yeah.
Victoria. And just purely on a subtype level, than anything else, stereotypically, um, I wouldn't be surprised if um, the self-preservation two found the sexual four challenging, because part of the self-preservation two's work is to get in touch with their inner four, and to get in touch with their feelings. And so I would imagine that could have been a challenging dynamic for you both, just because of the subtype piece.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. My dad was, he was killed when I was 13. So obviously just very sudden. um, he was away on a business trip out of the country when it happened. Huge disruption for the family.
Yeah.
My parents had a really great relationship. I felt really held, really safe, great community. I just grew up with a pretty, like, yeah, life was like, yeah, it was good. And my mom, her emotionality, particularly after that, and I was the youngest, I was the only one in the house still. Other sisters, one sister had another year of high school, but then the others were already gone. And so, yeah, being in that space with my mom and her emotionality and her inability to be um, with my emotionality as well, like just in her grief. And whew, I'm thinking back to various memories of being with her and how she wasn't available. She wasn't available as much really at all after my dad's death. So a lot of going on in my own. So maybe that also bumping moving the self-preservation instinct closer to the sexual instinct. And then with the breaking of the family apart, just my social instinct just totally like, everything's got broken apart. And um, that, yeah, they're being, yeah, that holding of the social, like that being broken.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Victoria. And like the trauma that you experienced there, and that we all experience in varying degrees, lesser and greater degrees throughout our lives. And I always find it quite refreshing to hear Bina Ranier say, although not word for word, but they say something like, in some kind of strange way, it's actually a blessing to have the trauma, because it can people that have had more trauma in their lives are more willing or more likely to do the inner work to grow, um if that makes sense, even though it's extremely painful. And um they put a sort of a positive spin on something that is, painful, very painful. But the pain isn't the destination. It's almost like a tunnel. It's almost like a yeah, it's like a uh the 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 butterfly in the making, if that makes sense. Like, part of the pain is the journey, even though it's painful. And that's just putting it mildly.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I, that's the largely the work. That's a big gift of the four.
Yeah.
Um, it's the most painful experience. mm, The the beauty, finding the beauty in it, the value in it, the meaning
Yeah.
in it, um, and yeah, yeah, the staying in it, the moving through it. Mm, mm, yeah, I do. I'm being drawn to share that I have just completed my training for working with hospice, and I've just gotten my first assignment. Um, and death has always been I've always death has always felt near to me. Um, and I think it would have always felt near to me if my dad and my mom hadn't died now yet. It's um, already. Uh, I'm, but death really feels near to me, and there's fear, and so I carry the BRCA2 gene, which is a reproductive gene mutation that increases my chances of reproductive cancer by 70-80%. And it's how my mom died and her mother and so, death can come at any time, right? And so there's wanting to step into that space and meet it. Um, and and knowing that this is such a part, like this is a part of reality. This is the one certain thing, is that yeah, our bodies are going to we're gonna die. And so the meeting of that moment, it's kind of like all of this work is for, it is, all of this work is for that moment of die, like the dying, and how I'm going to meet death, be with it.
Mm.
Yeah. And in body, in mind, in heart. Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's very powerful. I was only thinking the other day actually about death again, and just thinking it's the final surrender. It like we will either be forced to surrender, or we can willingly surrender, if that makes sense. But either way, we're gonna have to, one way or another, we're letting it go. And life is like in life, we want to hold on to this material security, this earthly certainty, this job, this thing, this relationship, this all of this temporary stuff, like wanting to hold on to it. But it's it's temporary. um,
Yeah.
and is it
Yeah.
is it the main thing? Is it the main thing? Like why are we here at this time on this earth? Is it just to get up in the morning, go to work, come home, and go to sleep and do it all over again? Is that it? I don't think so. um,
Mm.
yeah, it's part of
Mhm.
it. Yeah,
Yeah. It's part of it. Yeah. That the presencing, which is like that, I would say is what I am. Um, uh, that's such a huge, also part of my practice. Like the biggest, or is presence, to be present. And when I'm really present, that's when the opening of this, just the enormous amount of creativity and um, along with, presence that comes from like the inner work, doing the work, going in and working with the centers of intelligence and the type and subtype, and then like doing that work while like deepening in presence, and then, oh my gosh, what like, who, the connection inside that, the ground inside that, the expanse, the fullness, the um yeah, that's what I it I feel so fortunate and grateful to be on this path.
Mm.
It feels good. It feels really good. It feels really deeply, richly good. Yeah. I
Thank you for sharing that, Victoria.
don't know if that was totally clear.
Thank you for sharing that,
Okay.
Victoria. Thank you. Um, so I know that you also work professionally with the Enneagram. Can you share with us what it is that you do, and where people can find out more about your work and what you have to offer?
Sure. My partner and I both, it's part of our larger work is Enneagram typing and mentoring. And we work with individuals and we also work with couples. And we can go into work with groups. We like working with like men's groups and women's circles. Um and so we type and mentor, and you can find more information about that on our website, victoriaandbryce.com. It's a part of our larger work with people, like the inner work that we do.
Brilliant. Thanks, Victoria. I'm going to put a link to that in the description box below so people can just go straight there, click, and go straight to you. Is there anything else you'd like to share that I haven't asked that you would like to share with us?
Hmm. No, no, nothing
Yeah.
else. Hmm.
Victoria, thank you so much for everything that you've shared. It's been a very deep conversation, and just during the conversation, I've just felt really drawn into it, and there's just been a real sense of peace and a real sense of calm. Even though there sounds like there's a lot going on, a lot of like what we would call storms in life, yet you seem to have this centeredness and this peace and this presence, and that I feel like I've been really drawn into it, and um, yeah, I'm
Hmm.
really I'm really inspired by the
Hmm.
work that you're doing. Really inspired, and I imagine that people that work with you and your partner, are richly blessed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. That really means a lot. I really appreciate that. I've really enjoyed my time with you and your presence. Your you also you uh how do I say, your there's a calling in that I feel from you, and that keeps me aligned,
Mm.
for lack of better words. Okay. And so I it's like, yeah, I feel very safe around you.
Mm.
And that's not the right word. And then I'm like, well, I don't want that because like the six and safety, like that's not what I'm saying. It's like, um, um, I feel at ease with you, and also your clarity. that there's something that you're transmitting that then there's like a clearing for me. So I don't know if any of this makes sense. More, but hopefully to some degree it does, and may you receive it.
I do receive it, and thank you for sharing that, Victoria. It's been a very enlightening conversation, and thank you so much for your time in sharing all that you've shared. It's been incredibly insightful. I wish you all the best for the future, and I look forward to connecting with you again at some point.
Same. Yeah. Same. Thank you, Matt.
Bye, Victoria.